All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here at Anant. In this webinar, we're going to cover Cassandra as a service in the cloud, and we're going to focus on DataStax Astra, Amazon Keyspaces, and Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. As a little introduction, we're going to introduce each one, not necessarily dive too deep into the actual specifics of it, but we're going to give you a good little intro. And then we'll also have a live demo where we'll test out spinning up a DB on each of these services and showing you a couple different cool features each one provides. So a little about me. I'm an apprentice here at Anant. I joined in December 2019. If you were with us here last week, we wrapped up our doing SQL and reporting on Apache Cassandra with open source tools series. When this slide deck goes up on the YouTube channel tomorrow or the blog, you can check these blogs and webinars out. You can watch these webinars on youtube.com/AnantCorp, or you can read the blogs at blog.anant.us. And again, what we'll be covering today are DataStax Astra, Amazon Keyspaces, and Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. A couple other notables that we won't necessarily talk about today are Instacluster and Avon. They both do managed and hosting for Cassandra, depending on which big three platform you want to use. But we're just going to focus on Astra, Keyspaces, and Cosmos DB. So a little about DataStax Astra. If you're familiar with DataStax, or if you've been following Anant, we've actually have done an open source application, front end and back end, so full stack, that you can check out at the link there. But you can go to our GitHub, github.com/Anant, and the repo is called Cassandra.API. And we essentially created a full stack app that uses DataStax Astra as our Cassandra. So and it showcases how you can use Python, Node. There's two versions of the API, one written in Python, one written in Node. Essentially, it's a quick start for getting up and running with DataStax Astra. So feel free to check it out, try it out by yourself. A big thing that Astra provides is a 10 gig free tier with no credit card required. And that's a huge for anyone that's trying out Cassandra and wants to try it out in the cloud, but doesn't really want to pay up front. But there is a paid version, and we'll get to that when we get to the demo. So using DataStax Astra, why? It's to eliminate the overhead to install, operate, and scale Cassandra. All of that doing manual provisions and managing infrastructure, all of that is bypassed, and everything can be done with Astra itself. So another really cool thing Astra provides is out-of-the-box REST and GraphQL endpoints and a browser CQL shell, which we'll take a look at when we get to the demo. With these REST and GraphQL endpoints, you can essentially build an app bypassing a backend, right? So if you have all of your data stored in Cassandra, depending on how much processing you have to do, if you just need to do simple CRUD operations, you can go ahead and skip a server side of your app and just do whatever you need to do with your front end and these REST and GraphQL endpoints. The way that DataStax Astra is handled in the cloud is that it's powered by DataStax's open source Kubernetes operator for Cassandra. As mentioned before, there is a paid tier where you can deploy on AWS or GCP and still keep compatibility with open source Cassandra. And another big key point is that you can put your data where you need it without compromising performance, availability, and accessibility that comes with Cassandra. And DataStax also offers a Cassandra migration tool. Currently, you have to apply for it, but they do your first migration of your Cassandra app for free. All right, and then we'll take a deeper dive at the UI, UX of it once we get to the demo. So we'll move on to Amazon Keyspaces now. So Amazon Keyspaces is a scalable, highly available, and managed Apache Cassandra compatible, keyword compatible database. So Astra is more on the side of, or it's built with Apache Cassandra, whereas Keyspaces and Azure Cosmos DB that we'll be discussing after this are built on proprietary technologies, but they are considered compatible. So with Keyspaces, you can use CQL with APIs, and you can access drivers and developer tools that you're already using. You can update the applications that you have and use them for Keyspaces by just changing the host names as needed in terms of your endpoints. For the big reason that we're looking at these technologies is everything's moving to the cloud. It's easier, right? So when you do serverless, you're only paying for your resources that you use, and the service can automatically scale tables up and down depending on your traffic, which is really key. Say if you're like, you're paying for something, but you're not necessarily hitting the quotas for your traffic, you can always scale down, or vice versa. If you need to expand, you can expand quickly. And when using cloud technologies and using something like AWS, you're going to get consistent single-digit millisecond response times at any scale. And you can essentially build applications at any throughput and storage that can serve thousands of requests per second without needing capacity planning. And again, like because AWS is so big and so well known, it offers 99.99% availability with SLA in the AWS regions. Tables are encrypted, so you don't really have to worry about security too much, and they are replicated 3 times within the availability zones for high availability. So sometimes with Cassandra, if you're familiar with it, you can set replication factors and then do with your data centers, depending on how you're structuring it and how scaled it is, but Amazon Keyspaces handles that for you. And then you can create continuous table backups with terabytes of data with no performance impact to your application. And you can recover any of this at any point in time preceding 35 days. So say if you have a malicious attack or you just have data loss where something broke, you can always recover your data. So like I mentioned before, because AWS is not based on Apache Cassandra, rather it's Cassandra compatible with proprietary technology, there are some functional differences and some limitations with that. And more documented analysis of that is provided in their docs in the last 2 bullets. So when this slide deck goes out, you can check them out. So moving on to Azure Cosmos DB. Again, it's a fully managed NoSQL database. So again, it's not necessarily Apache Cassandra versus its proprietary technology. And Cosmos offers fast, flexible app development with SDKs for popular languages and APIs for SQL, Mongo, Cassandra, our focus, but Gremlin, so if you're trying to do graph DBs of the sort, and no ETL analytics. Excuse me. And like Azure and like Astra, it's fully managed and cost-effective serverless database with instant automatic scaling that responds to application needs. So I believe that there's a good visualization of this when we get to the demo, where you can just, it's a one-click scale almost kind of thing. And then again, because it's Azure, you have that, that reliance, you have that security, and you can have guaranteed business continuity with the 99.99% availability and enterprise level security. And like Amazon mentions, it's guaranteed speed at any scale, even through bursts with instant limitless elasticity, fast reads, and multi-master writes anywhere in the world. And a little bit more about Cassandra and how it works in Cosmos DB, there's a link below where you can check out the docs. So now moving into the demo, we're going to take a look at how fast and easy it is to spin up a DB on each service. And then we're also going to check out some cool features that each service provides on the platform, like CQL terminals, notebooks, monitoring, etc. So we'll take a break and see if anyone has any questions. All right, looks like no questions. So we'll go ahead and move on to the demo part of this webinar. So the way I'm going to structure this is we're going to get each one spinning up. So that way, by the time we get back to the first one, it should be ready to go. So we're going to start with DataStax Astra. Oh, let's try this again. All right, so when you don't have any databases and you first sign up and log in, this is going to be your scene or your view. So again, like I mentioned, they have a paid tier where you can have a little bit more complexity in your structure or in your modeling, but all we need is the free tier. Try Astra with no obligation, get 10 gigs of storage free forever, no credit card required. And that's huge. In comparison to the other two, like Keyspaces and Azure, you have to sign up for a free 1-year trial and then try it out. And then depending on what you're trying to do, you still might get charged. So this is a big plus for me if you're looking into using Cassandra in the cloud for a testing environment, or at least just to get used to it. I definitely recommend DataStax Astra. So we're just going to set our location and our estimated costs again when running or parked. Because we're on the free tier, it's going to be free. So we're just going to name this a demo. Our key space is going to be test, and then username, and password is password. And then we're going to go ahead and hit launch database. Usually this doesn't take too long, but again, like I mentioned, we're going to move on to the other ones and let this spin up in the background. So moving on to Keyspaces. Once you're logged in and you've accessed Amazon Keyspaces, this will be your dashboard. So there's a few things that we'll look at right away. So in our dashboard, we can see performance KPIs and graphs. So if we have CloudWatch also, you can integrate that. But obviously, we're not going to be doing anything heavy, so we're not going to be utilizing these graphs, but it's there. So you have real-time analytics, and then also for errors. So if you have failures, you can always check it out. So if we want to create a key space, we'll actually come back to this since we don't necessarily. Okay, we'll create the key space for now, but we'll come back to it because I forget if it takes a while, but they have this getting started where you can use their CQL editor. So it's pretty much just a copy and paste. So I'm just going to open this getting started so we can copy this CQL, and then we're going to paste it into their editor. And then we're going to run the command. Query select successfully executed. So if you go to the key spaces, we'll see our tutorial key space, and we'll see our replication strategy and access. So if we click on it, we can see other information about it. So if we have tags, tables within it, we'll just go ahead and copy a few more commands just to see what else you can do till you see the tables. And then we'll run the command, executed. So we'll go to tables, and then we see our table name and the key space is associated with, and then the RCU associated with it, and then the write capacity units as well. And then you can see the status it's still creating, but I should be able to click on it. And then we can see that we have point in time recovery. Mine's disabled for right now, but you can play with it on your own as well. And then you can see your the structure of your table. So you have your column names and then the types. And then you can look at your capacities. It's probably still loading, but once you're actually working with the data, you'll have more information in terms of metrics. And then if you have backups and then tags for if you need them, depending on how scaled your item is. But let's see, what else can we do? Just getting started. We'll go ahead and populate it. Run the command, it's executed. So we'll go back to tables, and then we'll see the table that we have. So we see our partition key as well. We don't have any clustering columns because it wasn't designated in the create table. Let's see if we can access, I think it's the data. Oh, that's not what I want. Let's see. Okay, but yeah, that's about it. So in terms of features, Amazon Keyspaces doesn't have as much as Azure and Astra does right now, right? Because we've only worked with the CQL editor, and that's about it that we can do directly on Keyspaces. But if you look in their documentation, we can go to getting started, and then they give you a good amount of all three have a good amount of getting started tutorials, so you can always learn there, or you can check out our repo, which is in the, or for Astra at least, you can check out github.com/Anant/Cassandra.API, and you can go ahead and get started with that open source full stack repo. So if we go into, okay, accessing Amazon Keyspaces. So there's a few different ways you can do it. You can use a console access with a CQLSH client. So you would need console access, but then if we're doing it programmatically, right? So DataStax, if you're familiar, has a bunch of drivers, or you can check Apache Cassandra's drivers. But if you're using these drivers, so say if we're using Node.js, if you look at the code, the way it connects, it's a little bit different, but for the most part, it's relatively similar. So if you're moving from using DataStax and moving into Amazon Keyspaces, it won't necessarily change too much, but there is tutorials on how to do it. So yeah, we'll go ahead and spin up Azure now that we're done with Keyspaces. So for the rest of the demo, we'll focus on Azure and Astra. So if we go to Azure, and this is your portal dashboard, we'll go to Cosmos DB, and then we'll go ahead and hit add. And so this is just simple setup, but account name, just gonna do, no, demo. And so this is where, like I mentioned, where Cosmos is proprietary technology. And so it's not necessarily based on Apache Cassandra. It's more compatible with Apache Cassandra. But with Azure, it's also compatible with SQL, Mongo, Gremlin, as we mentioned, if you want to do a graph database. But we're going to go ahead and select Cassandra as our API. And we have notebooks. So I'll talk a little bit more about this, but essentially they have internal Jupyter notebooks, which if you were with us in our doing SQL and reporting on Apache Cassandra series, we worked with Jupyter notebooks in the open source notebooks part. But then also, if you've been watching our Spark and Cassandra and doing machine learning series that Obi's in charge of, he also used Jupyter notebooks to show you how you can do machine learning with Spark and Cassandra. And if you missed any of these videos, you can always check them out at youtube.com/AnantCorp. But we'll go ahead and hit OK or on for notebooks, and for location, US East. And so you can more about capacity mode, but we'll skip that for now. And so we're going to free tier discount. This is non-production, obviously, and we're not using multi-region rights or availability zones. Networking, don't need to handle that. You can set up provisioning for backup policies, encryptions, tags, and then we'll go ahead and skip through all of that. Because again, this is to show you how you can get started and some of the cool features that they have. So we'll go ahead and hit and create. And it's submitting the deployment. So it's getting deployed. So we'll go ahead and go back to my portal. Let's go home, search for Cosmos. And then once it's up, it should show there. But we'll go ahead and move to Astra because it's done now. All right, so this will be your dashboard when you have a database in DataStax Astra. So straight off the jump, they have something called Secure Connect bundles. So that's something you would use with the DataStax driver. If you check out our open source repo that we have with this, you'll see how it's used. So it's essentially used with the driver. And so instead of using contact points and credentials, you just essentially set your authentication within your parameters that you're passing into the driver with the path to the Secure Connect bundle. And so it's basically a zip with a bunch of credentials in it. So like I mentioned, Astra has a REST API and a GraphQL API. So if you're want to bypass a backend in an app you're building, and all you need is, well, depending on how complex you're getting, but essentially you can do CRUD operations using straight from your Astra database, and you can bypass that backend. And then the GraphQL, there's more documentation if you want to read more about it. And then here is what we'll look at for the Developer Studio. So the Developer Studio is essentially for notebooks. And if you attended my series on doing SQL reporting, we were using DataStax Studio, but on the a local version to import the CQL commands we were eventually turning into SQL or analyzing with SQL. But you can use these notebooks to get started and do CQL directly into your Astra database. So like, this should be a tutorial. So here, so we have our language, CQL, and we have our Keyspace test, the one we made, right? And so this creates a table. Success. So then if I go into my schema view, I can see that the table's there without having to run any CQL verifications. So like describe table. But essentially, we now have a table that will eventually concede and make more tables that we can then access with like the REST API. Or we can use a driver and access it programmatically in an app. So that's one of the cool things about Astra, internal DataStax Studio, so you don't have to have it running on a Docker container or locally. So like Amazon Keyspaces, there is a CQL console. And just waiting for it to log in. Is that not right? Okay. So we'll go ahead and skip that for now because that's, I think, acting up. But in terms of monitoring, they have this health tab where they use Grafana, and they show you all this cluster overview and items that you'll need for metrics, monitoring your database, essentially. So if anything happens, you can see when it happened, if there were any mem table space issues, was there a bunch of requests at one time that caused something to happen? And then that requires you to scale, et cetera, depending on the way your server is provisioned. But if I can get this to work, but essentially it's just a CQLSH terminal. See if I need to add this. Okay. Looks like I might not be able to get the CQL console running, but essentially it's, if you're familiar with Cassandra, DSE, if you're opening it locally, it's just bin CQLSH, it's the same exact thing. So if you go to your actions, you can add additional key spaces, you can park your database without losing data and unpark it as necessary, and then you can terminate your database as needed. And it's pretty cool. So you can do a lot of things with DataStax Astra without paying a single cent and without having to have a year-long subscription that will get charged, say, if you forget at the end of the year. There's no need to worry about that. So let's go ahead and check if our Cosmos is done. And it is. Cool. So we will move on to Azure Cosmos DB. So this will be your dashboard once you click on your specific instance that you're running. So our demo here, and you have this diagnose and solve problems tab. So you can have diagnostics and metrics running similar to Astra and Keyspaces. If we go into our overview, and if we go to, see if I can find it real quick. Oh, no, it's still getting deployed, which is unfortunate. I think it would take a little bit faster, but last time it deployed, it only took about a couple minutes, but we'll just talk about what you have. So if you go to this Data Explorer tab, it's essentially a schema view, and you can see your data within, say, your Keyspaces or etc. See if I can pull it up here. They also have automation, which is really cool. So depending on what you need to do with your Cosmos instance, you can integrate tasks, automations, and monitoring. Essentially, in the Data Explorer, they also have a CQL terminal. And like I mentioned before, instead of DataStax, which has DataStax Studio notebooks, Azure uses IPython notebooks, so also known as Jupyter notebooks. So if you're trying to do Spark, and if you're running like Databricks or something, but if you're just using Apache Spark, you can run Spark within those Jupyter notebooks on your data all within this UI. So you don't have to do anything outside of it. So that's something really cool that Amazon Keyspaces didn't have. That allowed you to do Jupyter notebooks or any kind of notebook task within Keyspaces UI itself. Let's see. Yeah, I was really looking forward to show that, but this is taking much longer than I thought it would. All right, we'll come back to this if we have the time. Yeah, and see if the end of this webinar it's still up. We'll double check, but if it's not, you guys can test it out on your own. If you have an Azure account, or you can sign up for a year-long free account where you get $200 worth of credits as well. So yeah, thank you for joining us here. If you were able to take something away, if you have any questions, if you want to take your maintained server and do Cassandra in the cloud, you can reach out to us at solutions@anant.us. You can visit our site and contact us there as well. If you have any questions on Spark and Kafka and how we can help your business platform and fast data, you can always contact us as well. And then I will open it up to questions one more time to see if anyone has anything. All right, looks like no real questions. Let's just check Azure one more time to see if it's done, because I really wanted to show you this because it was really cool. I didn't know that it had Jupyter notebooks, because that makes, say if you're running machine learning on your Cassandra database, it makes everything just super helpful because you can do it all in one place. You don't have to worry about spinning up Docker containers or running something on some kind of container technology to make it in the cloud, but you can do everything within one cloud service. Let's just try one more time. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but I definitely recommend you check it out, and I recommend you check out all three: DataStax Astra, Amazon Keyspaces, and Microsoft Azure Cosmos DB. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, if you want to get help on your Cassandra platform and you want to make it scalable, if you want to push it to the cloud, you can go ahead and contact us at solutions@anant.us. Thank you.